All right. Well, now let's move on to step 3, and that's investing, right? I mean, that's the whole crux of wealth creation. That's the big journey that helps you create wealth in the long term for your retirement or any other financial goals that you may be having even prior to retirement. Every month, of course, and in fact, today is the 1st of July, so I'm sure many of you may have got your salary credited today in your bank accounts. How many of you have this feeling? Well, maybe not during the lockdown because you've got really nowhere to go, but outside of the lockdown, when things do resume, do you feel like you're left, ruffling your pocket, wondering if there's any money left at the end of the month? If so, then you need to divvy up your income in the proper manner. And how to essentially divvy up this income? What should be budgeted for what category of expense, investment, or any other bucket? I have with me Pranav Mishra, the head of retail liabilities with ICICI Bank, on the show. Pranav, many thanks for joining us today on the Money Show. Really a pleasure having you with us today. So I'm sure many of your clients as well may be telling you that, I have this major empty pocket syndrome that I face at the end of every month. And that's the reason we thought of, telling our viewers that, look, you've got your salary. Now, here's how you need to divide it. So Pranav, very often, and maybe for the people who may not be so financially savvy, the most common rule is 50-30-20. However, in your experience, what works best? How should individuals who get their salary today use it and distribute it evenly over the course of the month?
So thanks, Mubina. I think one of the biggest of the opportunity for any salaried or for that matter, any person who's generating income, 50, 30 and 20 is a very good thumb rule. And in fact, just to give a perspective to it, it was given by a senator out there in US named Elizabeth Warren. And the idea was because it was a highly consuming economy. And if you see India's trend today, India is also into a high consumption explosion. So primarily what it said is, though 20 comes at the last, but 20 is the savings part of it. 50, you may have to spend your salary towards the essential. So when you talk about any individual who's on to his career or maybe at a 30, 35 years of age, 50% of his expense or take-home salary. When I say take-home is primarily a salary which comes post your deduction of, if you're a salaried one, post your deduction of your provident fund and your taxes. So when the take-home comes in, 50 will go towards essential, 30 will go towards your wants. Wants means I need some interiors to be done, or I want some clothes to be bought, or some accessories to be done. So 30 goes there and the remaining 20 is, now it should not be remaining. So one should always be very clear about that. One cannot be an empty pocket if he or she tends to make 20% first of all allocated and then go on for his 50% to be spent on essential and 30% towards what you called as towards the wants. So there's a differential between an essential versus the so-called luxury, or today I'll not call it as luxury, I'll say wants.
Okay, let's focus on the biggest bracket first. That's the 50. You interestingly gave some very, you gave examples about, what's a want, what's a luxury, etc. But many people sometimes struggle to figure out what's an essential expense for them. I mean, one thing obviously that comes straight away to your mind is your food, right? Your essential expense would obviously be your grocery bill. So how would you, recommend people go about making a fixed essential expense list, that this is something non-negotiable and this is my monthly expenditure? What should be included? What should be excluded?
So if I just put across essentials as one of the clear-cut items on the 50% list, one should create a laundry list of things which are essential, and there can be certain set of things which may be essential for one and may not be essential, but primarily groceries, which is food. Second is shelter, which is your home. So if you have taken a home loan, the EMI of it to be paid is an essential. You need to take an insurance cover, and as you must have seen in the earlier episode when people were talking about it, the fact is that insurance is very, very critical. So that's where if you have a monthly life cover, health cover, parents cover, family floater, you need to pay its due policy premium. That also comes under essential. Utility bills, which is your electricity, water, gas connection. Fuel, which is for your car or your vehicle, is an essential. And today in COVID times, your Wi-Fi connection and your 4G is also now falling into an essential. So these are clear-cut essential. Create the laundry list of these essential, put amount which you are going to spend on it, and certain amounts will be fixed by nature, certain amount of, like in the grocery, you can add and subtract in order to make that 20% happen.
As you grow older, this may be an essential item list for maybe 20s and 30s, but as you grow older, Pranav, I know this essential expense list will tweak, will alter, right?
Yes. So you will end up buying a car. So a car loan will also be an essential. Your kids' education will come into an essential part. Their tuitions, their private coachings, their online tutorials, they will all come as a part of essential. So that's where the essential list tends to increase. But again, while the list increase, I think on a progressive profile or a person who's growing, his salary, I'll say, or his income also keeps on having increments onto it, the value or the absolute check. So today, if I am carrying, say, a salary of 1 lakh rupees per month, maybe 5 years from now, individual who has gone up to say 35 years of age, who was 30 earlier when he was drawing 1 lakh, now he's drawing a 1 lakh 30,000, 40,000. So 50% of 1 lakh 30,000 also tends to increase. Having said that, inflation needs to be incorporated in it. But yes, as you start growing old, your liabilities start increasing, your essential items will start increasing day by day.
Okay, all right. Emergency fund. Meantime, Pranav, this is something that everybody has realized the importance of during this pandemic. Unfortunately, many have faced income losses or job losses as well in the last 3-4 months. And they've thought back to themselves that only if I had created that emergency fund corpus, things would have perhaps been a bit easier. So, I'm sure you would recommend setting aside a certain percentage in an emergency fund as well. What should be that amount? How much should be accumulated?
So this is one of the most critical thing, and in this world of uncertainties and what you called as the VUCA world, VUCA, it's volatile, it is uncertain, it is complex. So what happens is, and it is ambiguous. Every individual, whether you are in business or whether you are into a job, whether you are in an organized sector or somewhere SME and so on and so forth, one very clear-cut thing that the thumb rule is that one should apportion 3 to 6 months of his income towards emergency fund. And why I'm saying 3 to 6 months, a person who has worked for a decade, so a 10-year of job, one should see to it that 3 months of his annual income has been accumulated, because that can take care of next 6 to 7 months of sustenance. Because in a situation which is abnormal, or a situation where somebody loses job, people tend to bring down their expenses. So 3 months for a decade of work, if somebody has worked for 2 decades, he should move towards a 4 to 5 months. And then somebody who has already given more than 2 decades of work and has only 5 or 7 or 10 years nearing towards 60, should have a 6 months accumulation, because that's very critical, because you have to keep yourself floating and you have to keep yourself sustaining till you get onto the situation which is far superior than job loss kind of a situation.
Where should this emergency fund be parked? Yes, it's one thing, to create this, but is it all right to leave that money lying in a savings account?
So my thing is that since emergency fund is to sustain one for next duration of, and when I say 3 to 6 months, I think one should use prudence on this particular thing. So emergency fund is something one should put with an approach which I called as SLR. So immediately I need certain amount of money. That money should be into complete liquid assets, which should be the L part of the SLR. And I'll come on to SLR. S is safety. So keep 33% towards safety, keep 33% towards liquidity. That liquidity part you should immediately, you can use in the month where something has happened and for a month or two. And then 1/3 of the money on the emergency fund can be on a return oriented instrument. But having said that, very clearly liquid assets or something which is interest generating or an income oriented should be the asset class preferably to be put in. So I would suggest fixed deposit, the recurring deposit, your what you called as savings bank account into liquid funds of mutual fund and some debt or asset allocation fund. So one can look at these to keep the emergency fund, because it cannot have a situation where you put that into a very high return bearing and the risk is high, and you may see that the erosion of capital happens. So no risk taking kind of a instrument should be there as part of emergency fund purpose.
Okay. All right. Okay, Pranav. Now focusing in on the 20 part, like you mentioned, right? It should actually be mentioned first, because that's the amount you save up, and from that you invest as well. That's an extremely important component of the 50-30-20 rule, because that eventually will help you create wealth. How you save, how you apportion this wealth as well. So yes, 20% of your monthly salary should be kept aside, and you should use this as a potential corpus to invest your money for the long term for your various financial goals. Now the question is, how should we divvy up this 20%? There are so many instruments out there, right? There's the equity bit, there's debt, there's fixed deposit, something very basic, very plain vanilla, then there's PPF, so on and so forth. There's a whole plethora of items over there. So now the question is, how do you divide that investment bit, that 20 bit, between equity, debt? And yes, I know the answer will be different depending on the profile of the investor or the individual. But let's take, for example, right now somebody who's starting off their career maybe in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah, so very clearly, so while you spoke about product, I would rather suggest that he needs to chalk out a plan for himself, which is called as a financial goals. So I will retire at 60. I am 25 years of age, 35 years from now, an extremely long term. So retirement as a goal should be kept as one of the clear-cut goal when somebody starts his or her career, be it in business, be it in salary segment. So retirement is one goal, and there, since it is a very, very long term, you can take a good what you call as exposure towards equity. One can open an NPS account. NPS is a low charge, and there you have options of ECG, which is equity, corporate, and government. So these are the three fund options one has, where 75% up to 75% one can go into equities. So retirement through your employee provident fund, if you are working in a corporate. If you are not, you are self-employed, then open a PPF account and keep that PPF kitty for your retirement. Create an NPS corpus for your retirement. Then the second goal is that a young guy at 25 would rather like to buy a vehicle for himself. It can be a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, depending on what strata he is. And since this goal will be in a very near future of 3 to 4 years, one should put money towards fixed deposit or an income-oriented debt funds, because that's a goal which will be immediate in 2 to 3 years time. And if you have another 10 years or 8 years or 7 years towards your house, though you may be taking a mortgage loan at that point of time, but you will require to have a down payment. And if it is 5 to 7 years, you can keep a blend of good equity as well as debt. So 7 to 8 years, 9-year goal can be a balanced one where you should deploy certain amount of money. Definitely remember that buy insurance towards your protection of life, because anything happens, and if you have dependent parents and others, they are dependent on your income. So they are given that kind of a cover. Simultaneously, cover for your parents around health should be also taken into cognizance when you are planning your 20% savings. Then if you have a marriage to happen for you, create a corpus separately for marriage. So create a goal. If the goal is long term, take an exposure into equity. If the goal is near term or a short term, and I call short term as 1 to 2 years, medium term is 3 to 7 years, and 10-year onwards is a long term, you should do the asset allocation accordingly. You can buy some bit of gold also as a part of safety and maybe use during one's marriage.
So in that case, Pranav, right now, if you're 20, 25, 30, then retirement could be considered as a long-term goal. However, as you age, let's say if retirement age is 65 and you're approaching 55, 60, then retirement would become a more medium-term to slowly short-term goal. How should asset allocation change then?
So if you ask me for a person who is at an age of 50, 55, I would always suggest that the asset allocation should be more income oriented. Because now what has happened is most of your, I'll say, liabilities or dependents. So if one is 55 years of age, I'm assuming if there were dependent kids, they must have got married or they must have got settled at least. Because generally age of kids is anything between 30 to 35. So by the age of 55, you will have kid who's at 20, 21, 22. So depending on that particular thing, one should definitely, if you're planning for your retirement goal, one should get more towards income oriented than growth orientation. Now, because your retirement is nearby, you cannot risk your savings and capital and corpus with equity kind of an instrument if it is just 3 years or 4 years. So if you are somewhere around 56, 57 and 60 is the age of retirement, then you should see to it that most of your asset allocation is moving towards income orientation. You will see your PPF nearing towards your maturity. So PPF maturities, if they come, deploy it into an income bearing instrument, go in for MIPs than getting into something which is more equity oriented. So I would not suggest higher exposure of equity at the age of 55, 56 unless you have been extremely ultra HNI through your income generation. Then age doesn't matter. Then it hardly makes a difference.
All right, Pranav, last two questions. I'm just going to roll them up in one to save time. Firstly, many individuals did think that this year maybe they'll hang up their boots, they'll retire and, crack open that nest egg that they've been saving up for a very long time. But forget about equity MFs, which obviously these people would have prudently maybe trimmed down exposure to, like, as per the rules that you as well mentioned. But even debt MF NAVs have seen a bit of a crack, right? And the second question is, again, related to this one, but yeah, for all those right now who are opening their investment portfolio, their CAM statement, and are looking at red across the screens, what's your advice to both of these people?
My advice to everyone at this given point of time, if they are opening up their statements, and we have seen both at an equity as well as at a debt side, some bit of pressure coming in. And yes, we are not into normal times. We are in a pandemic kind of a situation. So my suggestion is, if you had any of your goals or you have a retirement which is a year or a year and a half away, look at each and every investments now on a quarterly basis and try to see to it wherever you are able to reach towards what you called as, if it has been an investment over last 3 to 4 years, stay put onto it. And I think I always believe that after fear, there is always a faith. And when recovery comes back, you will be in a position to capitalize. But my suggestion is, have patience at this given point of time. Anything which you are redeeming out, because I'm assuming people who are at 55, 56, 57 or reaching about towards their retirement even at 59, use your fixed deposit, use your PPF, use your employee provident fund. than using any of your equity statements, equity investments at this given point of time to be redeemed because you are in a fear and you are finding that the markets have come down and I have eroded some bit.
Okay.
Things will improve, and that is where I would suggest patience is the best essence.
Right. Okay, great. Pranav, very valuable words of advice, and I hope that all of our viewers watching do gain a lot from this. Very relevant as well, because today is the 1st of July. They've got all of that money, and since you've got nowhere else to go, maybe the proportion of the 30% could reduce, and you could perhaps increase the proportion of the 20% by a larger quantum. Thank you, Pranav, once again for joining us. Pleasure having you with us. We'll wrap it up on The Money Show. Don't forget, tomorrow we'll be back with day 4. It's a very special one because you get to ask Nilesh Shah of Kotak AMC about your portfolio. Write in your queries to us on The Money Show at etnow.tv.